I knew something was off the moment I walked into the house. It wasn't just the usual quiet that greeted me, but the faint, unmistakable smell of cigarette smoke. Neither Barb nor I smoked, which meant only one thing. I couldn't deny the knot forming in my stomach as I walked further in. "Who is he, Barb?" "I can smell him," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Barb appeared from the kitchen, looking startled but quickly masking it with feigned confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, her voice annoyingly calm. I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I went straight to our bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and powered it up. Barb followed me, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice rising. Without answering, I navigated to the surveillance feed from the camera I had discreetly installed in the living room weeks ago. The screen came to life, showing Barb with a man I didn't need to recognize, their intimate embrace undeniable. I turned off the video, feeling a sick satisfaction at Barb's scream. "No, I want to watch it!" she yelled, but I ignored her. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Revenge was on my mind, and I wasn't alone in my misery. Two of my friends, Mark and Tom, were in the same boat. Their wives were also seeing other men. We decided to take matters into our own hands and planned a night that none of them would forget. The next evening, we drove to the house where our unfaithful wives were having their dates. We waited until they had gone to their rooms. Then I damaged the electrical wiring, plunging the house into darkness. The sense of impending chaos fueled my resolve. Mark reached into his bag and pulled out 6 live grenades, their ominous presence sending a chill down my spine. "It's time to start the real brutal revenge," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. We knew the grenades were just a threat, a psychological weapon to instill fear, but it was only the beginning of their nightmare. As the house remained shrouded in darkness, the stage was set for the most unforgettable night of their lives. The tension in the air was palpable as we moved through the darkened house. The only sounds were the hushed whispers of our own breath and the occasional creak of the floorboards under our feet. We knew the layout well, having scouted the place during the day. We reached the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I could hear muffled voices coming from behind the closed doors. My heart pounded in my chest, the adrenaline pushing me forward. Mark handed out the grenades, and we each took 2, careful not to pull the pins. These weren't just ordinary grenades. Mark, a former military engineer, had modified them to emit a piercing, high-pitched alarm instead of exploding. It was enough to scare anyone out of their wits without causing actual harm. "On my count," I whispered. 3, 2, 1. We kicked open the doors simultaneously, tossing the grenades inside. The alarms went off instantly, shrieking loudly and echoing through the house. The startled screams from the rooms were almost drowned out by the noise. I barged into the room where Barb was, finding her tangled in the sheets with her lover. Their terrified faces were worth every ounce of planning and effort. Barb's eyes locked onto mine, wide with fear and confusion. "Who the hell are you?" the man shouted, trying to cover himself. "Doesn't matter who I am," I replied coldly. "What matters is what you are done." Tom and Mark were having similar confrontations in the other rooms. The chaos was complete, and the reality of their actions was hitting our wives hard. This was just the beginning of their payback. "We are not here to hurt anyone," I continued, raising my voice over the alarms. "But you need to understand the consequences of your actions. This is just a taste of what could happen if you don't come clean and make things right." Barb's lover looked ready to bolt, but there was nowhere to go. The house was surrounded, and we had made sure of that. I saw the realization dawn on Barb's face. She knew there was no escaping the truth now. "Everyone out of the rooms," Mark shouted. "We're going to have a little talk." We herded them into the living room, the alarms still ringing in the background. The looks on their faces were a mix of anger, fear, and shame. It was a small victory, but it felt good. "We'll leave you to figure out the rest," I said, turning to leave. "But remember, we know everything, and we'll be watching." As we walked out, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, and I knew the road ahead would be rocky. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control over my life again. The nightmare was far from over, but at least now, it was on our terms. The drive back to my place was silent, the weight of what we'd just done settling heavily on all of us. Tom finally broke the silence, his voice tense. "You think they'll go to the cops?" I shook my head. They won T. Not if they know what is good for them. This was a warning, not an attack. They won to risk exposing their own infidelities. Mark grunted in agreement. They'll keep quiet, for now. We dropped Tom off first, then Mark. When I finally got home, the house felt emptier than ever. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me with a gnawing sense of exhaustion and unease. I collapsed on the couch, my mind racing. This wasn't tea over. I had to stay vigilant. The next morning, I received the first sign of fallout. Barb's number flashed on my phone. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. "John, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "Please, meet me at the park, just for a few minutes." I sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable. "Fine, I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived at the park, Barb was already there, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. I approached her cautiously, sitting down but keeping my distance. "Talk," I said, crossing my arms. "John, I'm sorry," she began, her voice cracking. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake, a huge mistake." I scoffed. "A mistake? You mean getting caught was a mistake? Don T tried to downplay what you did." She flinched at my words, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, but I don't want to lose everything. Can we try to work things out? Maybe go to counseling or something?" I stared at her, my emotions a swirling mess of anger, betrayal, and a faint, lingering sadness. "Work things out. Barb, you didn't just cheat on me. You lied to my face, you betrayed our vows. How am I supposed to trust you again?" She wiped at her eyes, looking desperate. "I'll do anything, John. Anything to make this right. I love you. I really do." I shook my head, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up. "Love? You call this love? You are delusional. This isn't something you can just fix with apologies and promises." Barb reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, John, give me a chance. I'll do whatever it takes." I stood up, needing to put distance between us. "I don't know, Barb. I need time to think. But done to think for a second that everything can go back to the way it was. You broke something that might never be fixed." As I walked away, I felt her eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Later that evening, Mark and Tom came over to discuss the next steps. We gathered in my living room, the air thick with unresolved tension. "So, what's the plan now?" Tom asked, leaning forward. "We wait," I said. "We need to see how they react. If they try anything, we'll be ready." Mark nodded. "And if they don't it?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Then we figure out our next move. But one thing's for sure, we're not letting this go." As the night wore on, we talked and strategized, our bond strengthening through shared betrayal. We were in this together, and no matter what came next, we'd face it head on. The nightmare was far from over, but at least we had each other. The next few days were a blur of tension and paranoia. Every time my phone buzzed or the doorbell rang, my heart leaped into my throat. Barb had tried calling a few more times, leaving tearful voicemails that I promptly deleted without listening. I needed space to clear my head, but it seemed like I couldn't escape the constant reminders of her betrayal. Mark and Tom were in similar states of unrest. We kept in close contact, updating each other on any developments. So far, there had been no police involvement, and our wives seemed to be lying low, likely still reeling from the shock of our confrontation. One evening, as I was nursing a beer and trying to distract myself with a mindless TV show, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. "Mark, meet at my place, urgent, bring Tom." I grabbed my keys and headed out, my anxiety ratcheting up another notch. When I arrived at Mark S. house, Tom was already there, pacing in the living room. Mark was seated on the couch, a laptop open in front of him. "What's going on?" I asked, closing the door behind me. Mark looked up, his expression grim. "We have a problem." He turned the laptop around to face us, and my blood ran cold. On the screen was an email thread between Barb and her lover. It detailed plans for meeting up, explicit exchanges, and worst of all, discussions about how they could manipulate the situation to their advantage. "Where did you get this?" Tom asked, his voice tight with anger. Mark S.'s face hardened. "I had a contact dig into their emails. Turns out they are planning to turn this around on us. They are going to claim we threatened them and use that as leverage in divorce proceedings." I felt a surge of anger and fear. "They're trying to make us look like the bad guys." Tom clenched his fists. "This isn't just about revenge anymore. They're trying to destroy us." Mark nodded. "We need to be smarter. We need to find a way to protect ourselves and expose them for what they are." As we sat there brainstorming our next move, an idea began to form. It was risky, but it could work. We needed to gather more evidence, something irrefutable that would prove their infidelity and malicious intent. "We need to set a trap," I said slowly, the plan solidifying in my mind. "Catch them in the act, get recordings, photos, anything that will hold up in court." Tom raised an eyebrow. "And how do we do that without getting caught ourselves?" "We use technology to our advantage," I replied. "Hidden cameras, audio bugs, whatever it takes. We need to be meticulous and careful." Mark leaned forward, a determined look on his face. "I can handle the tech side of things. We need to figure out when and where they are meeting next." Over the next few days, Mark set up surveillance equipment in strategic locations, while Tom and I did our best to keep a low profile and gather any information we could. We monitored their communications closely, waiting for the perfect opportunity to catch them red-handed. Finally, our patience paid off. We discovered that Barb and her lover were planning a rendezvous at a nearby motel. It was the break we needed. On the day of the meeting, Mark and I positioned ourselves in a car parked discreetly near the motel, while Tom stayed in contact from his place, ready to call in any backup if needed. We had the motel room bugged with hidden cameras and microphones, all feeding live footage to Mark S.'s laptop. We watched as Barb and her lover arrived, their casual demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil they had caused. They entered the room, and the cameras captured everything: their intimate moments, their conversations, and most importantly, their plans to manipulate the situation against us. It was all there, undeniable proof of their deceit and betrayal. "We got them," Mark said, his voice triumphant. "This is exactly what we needed." Tom S.'s voice crackled through the speaker. "Good work, guys. Now we need to make sure this evidence gets to the right people." As we gathered our equipment and left the scene, I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. We had the upper hand now, and it was time to turn the tables. The nightmare wasn't over, but we were finally in control, and I was determined to see this through to the end. Armed with irrefutable evidence, we knew the next step was crucial. We needed to handle this delicately and legally to ensure Barb and her lover couldn't twist the situation to their advantage. We agreed to meet at my place to strategize our next move. "First things first," Mark said as we settled in my living room. "We need a good lawyer, someone who can navigate this mess and make sure we come out on top." Tom nodded. "I know a guy. He has helped a friend through a nasty divorce. I'll give him a call." Within a few hours, we had an appointment set up with Tom S. lawyer, a seasoned professional named Larry Donovan. The next day, we gathered all our evidence and headed to Larry S.'s office. His office was cozy but professional, with shelves lined with law books and diplomas on the walls. Larry listened intently as we laid out our story, his expression growing graver by the minute. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This is quite the situation you've found yourselves in," he said. "But you've done well gathering this evidence. It is solid and should hold up in court. However, we need to proceed carefully." "What is our next move?" I asked, eager to get things rolling. "We'll start by filing for divorce on grounds of adultery," Larry explained. "Given the evidence you have, it should be straightforward. We'll also prepare a restraining order to protect you from any false claims they might make about harassment or threats." Larry worked quickly, drafting the necessary documents and setting the legal wheels in motion. Over the next few days, we prepared ourselves for the upcoming battle. The tension was high, but we felt a sense of purpose and solidarity. Then came the day we served the papers. Larry advised us to do it as publicly as possible to ensure there were witnesses and to prevent any false claims of aggression. We decided to serve Barb at her workplace. I arrived at Barb's office building with Larry and a process server. We waited in the lobby, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. When Barb appeared, the process server stepped forward. "Barbara, you've been served," he said, handing her the documents. Barb's face went pale as she glanced at the papers, then at me. "John, what is this?" "It is exactly what it looks like," I said calmly. "It's over, Barb. We have all the evidence we need." She opened her mouth to argue, but Larry stepped forward. "Miss Thompson, I advise you to contact your lawyer. Everything is in those papers." As we walked away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It was a necessary step, but it didn't make the emotional pain any easier to bear. That evening, we regrouped at my place, feeling a cautious optimism. "We did it," Tom said, raising his glass in a toast. "Here's to moving forward." "To moving forward," Mark and I echoed, clinking our glasses together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and tense waiting. Barb and her lover tried to mount a defense, but the evidence we had gathered was damning. The court saw through their attempts to manipulate the situation, and the restraining orders were granted without much hassle. One evening, as we were winding down after another long day, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Barb. "Barb, can we talk, please? Just one last time." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe, choosing a table in a quiet corner. "John," she began, her voice trembling, "I know there's no excuse for what I did. I wanted to say I am sorry, truly. I never meant for things to get this far." I looked at her, the woman I had once loved so deeply, now a stranger to me. "Sorry isn't enough, Barb. You didn't just betray me, you tried to destroy me. There's no coming back from that." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I wish things had been different." I stood up, feeling a strange sense of closure. "So do I. Goodbye, Barb." Walking out of the cafe, I felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The nightmare was nearing its end, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. There would be more challenges ahead, but at least now, I was free to face them on my own terms. With Barb's desperate apology behind me, I focused on the legal battle ahead. Larry, our lawyer, was a formidable ally. He meticulously prepared our case, ensuring every detail was covered. The evidence we had gathered was our ace in the hole, but we needed to stay vigilant. We were ready for the first court hearing. The courtroom was intimidating, with its high ceilings and stern atmosphere. I sat next to Larry, my nerves on edge as we waited for the judge to enter. Barb and her lover sat across from us, their lawyer whispering urgently to them. When the judge finally took his seat, the proceedings began. Larry presented our case with precision, laying out the evidence of Barb's infidelity and the malicious plans they had to frame me and my friends. The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. Barb's lawyer attempted to counter our claims, arguing that we had invaded her privacy and exaggerated the situation. But our evidence was rock solid. The hidden camera footage, the emails, and the recorded conversations left little room for doubt. After what felt like an eternity, the judge called a recess. As we stepped outside the courtroom, Larry turned to us with a confident smile. "We are in good shape. The judge seems to be leaning in our favor." Despite his reassurance, I couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at me. This was my life on the line, and the thought of losing everything was terrifying. The final ruling came a few weeks later. The judge granted the divorce on the grounds of adultery, awarding me a favorable settlement. The restraining order was upheld, providing an extra layer of protection. It was a victory, but it felt bittersweet. With the legal battle behind us, Mark, Tom, and I took some time to reflect on what we had been through. The camaraderie we had built through this ordeal was unbreakable, but the scars of betrayal ran deep. One evening, as we sat around a bonfire in Mark's backyard, Tom brought up the future. "So what now? We've won the battle, but what about the war? How do we move on from this?" Mark poked at the fire with a stick, the flames casting flickering shadows on his face. We rebuild, one step at a time. We have been through hell, but we are still standing. That counts for something. I nodded, taking a deep breath. You are right. It's not going to be easy, but we have to find a way to move forward. This can define us. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above us, I felt a sense of resolve. The nightmare had taken its toll, but it had also revealed our strength and resilience. We had survived, and now it was time to start anew. The following weeks were dedicated to picking up the pieces of our lives. I focused on my work, throwing myself into projects to keep my mind occupied. Mark and Tom did the same, each of us finding solace in routine and productivity. But moving on wasn't just about staying busy. It was about facing the emotional fallout and finding a way to heal. I started seeing a therapist, someone who could help me process the anger, sadness, and betrayal that still lingered. It was during one of these sessions that I had a breakthrough. My therapist, Dr. Patel, asked me a simple question that changed everything. John, what do you want your life to look like in a year? In 5 years? What do you need to do to make that happen? I hadn't thought that far ahead. The future had always been a nebulous concept, overshadowed by the pain of the present. But as I sat there pondering her question, I began to see a glimmer of hope. I want to be happy, I said slowly. I want to trust again, to build a life that is meaningful and fulfilling. I want to let go of the past and focus on what lies ahead. Dr. Patel smiled. That is a good start. Now, let us work on how you can achieve that. With her guidance, I began to set small, achievable goals, reconnecting with friends, exploring new hobbies, and taking care of my physical and mental health. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a step in the right direction. One evening, I received a call from Tom. He sounded upbeat, a welcome change from the somber tones of the past months. John, I've been thinking, he said. How about we take a trip? Just the three of us. Get away from everything and clear our heads. A trip. The idea was enticing. A chance to escape, to find some peace and perspective. That sounds perfect, I replied. Where do you have in mind? Let's go camping, Mark suggested. Somewhere remote, where we can unplug and just be ourselves. And so we planned our escape. A week in the wilderness, far from the chaos and reminders of our past lives. As we packed our gear and prepared for the adventure, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. This trip wasn't just about getting away, it was about rediscovering who we were and what we wanted out of life. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while it felt full of possibilities. The day of our camping trip arrived, and we were all eager to leave our troubles behind, even if just for a little while. Mark, Tom, and I packed up Mark's SUV with tents, sleeping bags, coolers, and enough supplies to last a week in the wilderness. We chose a remote spot in the mountains, far from cell service and the prying eyes of the world. The drive was filled with a mix of anticipation and lighthearted banter, a welcome change from the tension that had dominated our lives recently. We joked about our lack of survival skills and made grand plans for the week ahead, determined to enjoy every moment. After a few hours on the road, we finally arrived at our campsite. It was a picturesque spot by a crystal-clear lake, surrounded by towering pine trees and the distant sound of a waterfall. We set up our tents and gathered firewood, falling into a comfortable rhythm as we worked together. As the sun began to set, we built a roaring campfire and settled around it, the warmth and crackling flames providing a sense of comfort and security. We cooked hot dogs and marshmallows, enjoying the simplicity of the meal and the camaraderie we shared. Here is to a week of peace and freedom, Tom said, raising his beer. No drama, no worries. Just us and nature. Cheers to that, Mark and I echoed, clinking our bottles together. The first night was magical. The stars were brilliant against the dark sky, and the air was crisp and clean. We stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing, letting the conversation flow naturally. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine sense of contentment. The next few days were a blur of hiking, fishing, and exploring. We discovered hidden trails, swam in the lake, and even managed to catch a few fish for dinner. The physical activity and the beauty of our surroundings worked wonders on our spirits, helping us to forget the turmoil we had left behind. One afternoon, as we were lounging by the lake, Mark turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "John, have you thought about what you want to do next? I mean, after all this is over." I considered his question, the peacefulness of our surroundings giving me the clarity I needed. I want to start fresh, maybe move to a new city, find a new job, and just rebuild my life from the ground up. I want to focus on the things that make me happy. Tom nodded in agreement. I've been thinking the same. This whole experience has shown me what's really important. I don't want to waste any more time on things that don't matter. Mark smiled. Sounds like a plan. Maybe we can all find a new start together. We've been through so much already, it makes sense to keep supporting each other. The idea was appealing. We had become a tight-knit group, bound by our shared experiences and mutual support. Moving forward together seemed like the natural next step. As the week went on, the sense of healing and renewal grew stronger. We talked about our dreams and aspirations, making plans for the future that felt achievable and exciting. The trip was more than just an escape. It was a turning point, a chance to redefine our lives and priorities. On our last night, we sat around the campfire once more, reflecting on the journey we had taken, both physically and emotionally. "I think this trip was exactly what we needed," Tom said, staring into the flames. "It's given us a new perspective, a chance to see things clearly." "Agreed," Mark added. "We've been through hell, but we've come out stronger, and now we have the chance to build something better." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for my friends and the experiences we had shared. "Here's to new beginnings," I said, raising my bottle once more, "and to always having each other's backs." "To new beginnings," Tom and Mark echoed, clinking their bottles with mine. As we packed up the next morning and headed back to civilization, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of promise. With my friends by my side, I knew we could face whatever came next. The nightmare of betrayal and revenge was behind us. It was time to move forward, to embrace the possibilities ahead, and to find happiness once more. Returning from our camping trip, we were invigorated and ready to embrace the future. Our little getaway had given us the clarity we needed, and now it was time to put our plans into action. The first order of business was finding new jobs and places to live. Mark, Tom, and I decided to start fresh in a new city, far from the memories of our past lives. We chose a bustling metropolis known for its vibrant culture and opportunities. It felt like the perfect place to rebuild. Mark, ever the tech guru, quickly landed a job at a prominent IT company. Tom, with his knack for sales, secured a position at a leading marketing firm. I found a role at an architectural firm, a field I'd always been passionate about but had never pursued seriously. The move was both exhilarating and daunting. Packing up our lives and leaving behind everything familiar was a leap of faith, but we were ready. The new city welcomed us with open arms, and we settled into a shared apartment in a lively neighborhood. As we began our new jobs and explored the city, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The weight of the past was lifting, replaced by a hopeful anticipation for what lay ahead. We spent our evenings discovering new restaurants, attending local events, and enjoying the vibrant nightlife. One Friday night, after a particularly long week at work, we decided to check out a popular local bar. It was bustling with energy, the kind of place where you could lose yourself in the music and the crowd. We found a spot near the dance floor and ordered drinks, ready to unwind. As the night went on, I noticed a woman at the bar, her eyes occasionally glancing our way. She was striking, with a confident smile and an easy laugh. Encouraged by the buzz of the evening, I decided to introduce myself. "Hi, I am John," I said, trying to sound casual despite the butterflies in my stomach. She turned to me, her smile widening. "Nice to meet you, John. I am Emily." We started talking, and I quickly realized how easy it was to connect with her. We shared stories about our lives, our jobs, and our mutual love for exploring new places. Emily had a warmth and openness that drew me in, making me forget all my worries. Mark and Tom joined us, and soon our small group was laughing and chatting as if we'd known each other for years. Emily introduced us to her friends, and the night became a blur of dancing, conversation, and genuine connection. As the bar began to empty, Emily and I found ourselves alone on the patio, the cool night air a welcome relief from the heat inside. "So, what brought you to the city?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. A fresh start. Things got complicated back home, and my friends and I needed a change. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I get that. Sometimes you need to leave the past behind to find something better." Her words resonated deeply with me. Exactly. And so far, this city has been more than I could have hoped for. We spent the rest of the night talking, sharing dreams and fears in a way that felt surprisingly intimate for a first meeting. As the sun began to rise, we exchanged numbers, promising to meet up again soon. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I grew closer. Our dates were filled with laughter and discovery, each one deepening the bond between us. She was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that happiness was possible even after the darkest of times. Mark and Tom were also thriving in their new lives. Mark had started dating a colleague from work, and Tom was seeing someone he had met at a networking event. We were all moving forward, finding joy and purpose in our new surroundings. One evening, as we sat on the rooftop of our apartment building, watching the city lights twinkle below, Mark raised his glass. "Here's to new beginnings," he said, echoing the toast we had made on our camping trip. "And to the friends who made it possible," Tom added, clinking his glass with ours. I looked at my friends, feeling a surge of gratitude. "To new beginnings and lifelong friends," I said, raising my glass. As we drank, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found love, friendship, and a renewed sense of purpose. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it, one day at a time. Life in our new city had settled into a comfortable rhythm. My relationship with Emily was blossoming, and Mark and Tom were thriving both personally and professionally. It felt like we had finally left the shadows of our past behind us. But as we all knew too well, life had a way of throwing unexpected twists our way. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a project at work, I received an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "Urgent reaching out from the past." With trembling hands, I opened the email. It was from Barb. She had found my new contact information and had reached out, seemingly desperate. "John, I know I am the last person you want to hear from, but I need your help. I am in serious trouble and I have nowhere else to turn. Please, can we meet? I promise it is important. Barb." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to ignore the email, to keep her firmly in the past where she belonged, but another part of me, the part that had loved her once, felt a pang of concern. I decided to consult with Mark and Tom before making any decisions. That evening, we gathered in our apartment's living room. I showed them the email, gauging their reactions. "Can you believe this?" I asked, pacing the room. "After everything she did, she has the nerve to ask for help." Tom frowned, leaning back in his chair. "It is suspicious, that S, for sure. But what if she's genuinely in trouble? Do we just ignore it?" Mark shook his head. "We need to be careful. It could be a trap, or she could be trying to drag you back into her mess. But I get why you are conflicted. What do you think, John?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, I don't trust her, but I also can't ignore the possibility that she's in real danger. Maybe I should meet her, but only if you two come with me. We need to be cautious. After some deliberation, we agreed to meet Barb in a public place. The next day I replied to her email, setting up a meeting at a busy coffee shop downtown. If this was some kind of trick, we wanted to ensure we were on neutral ground. The day of the meeting, my nerves were on edge. Emily noticed my anxiety and gently pressed for details. I decided to be honest with her, explaining the situation. "John, I trust you," she said, squeezing my hand. "Just be careful. I don't want you to get hurt again." Her support gave me the strength I needed. Mark, Tom, and I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a table near the entrance. We watched as people came and went, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, Barb walked in. She looked different, tired, worn down, and frail, She spotted us and hesitated before making her way over. The tension was palpable as she sat down, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cut to the chase, Barb," Mark said sternly. "Why are you here?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I am in trouble, John. Big trouble. After everything that happened, I thought I could start over too. But things spiraled out of control. My lover, the one from before, he turned out to be involved in some illegal activities. Drugs, money laundering, you name it. And now he has disappeared, leaving me to deal with the mess." Tom's eyes narrowed. "And you expect us to help you? After you tried to ruin our lives?" Barb's eyes filled with tears. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I am desperate. The people he was involved with are dangerous. They've threatened me, and I don't know what to do." I studied her face, looking for any sign of deceit. She seemed genuinely terrified, but after everything we'd been through, it was hard to trust her. "Why should we believe you?" I asked finally. "How do we know this isn't another scheme?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "This is everything I have. Documents, emails, proof of what he was involved in. I am not lying, John. I am scared for my life." I opened the folder, glancing through the contents. It was a detailed account of illegal activities implicating her lover and several others. It looked legitimate, but we needed to be sure. "Okay," I said slowly. "We'll help you. But we are doing this on our terms. We'll verify this information and see what we can do. But if you're lying, Barb, I swear there will be consequences." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, John. I promise. I'm telling the truth." As we left the coffee shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were diving headfirst into another storm. But this time we were prepared. We would verify her claims, protect ourselves, and make sure that whatever happened next, we would come out stronger. Back at the apartment, Mark, Tom, and I pored over the documents, reaching out to Larry for his legal expertise. It was a risk, but if Barb was telling the truth, we might have just found ourselves in the middle of something far bigger than personal betrayal. The past had reared its ugly head once more, but we were ready to face it, together. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to verify the information Barb had provided. Larry, our lawyer, was instrumental in this, using his connections to dig into the documents and uncover the truth. The deeper we delved, the more we realized how serious the situation was. Barb's lover had indeed been involved in significant criminal activities, and his sudden disappearance left a dangerous vacuum. Emily was supportive throughout the process, her concern for my safety palpable. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said one evening as I was preparing to meet with Mark and Tom. "I don't trust Barb, but I trust you." "I promise," I said, giving her a reassuring kiss. "We'll handle this." Larry confirmed our worst fears. The evidence was legitimate, and Barb's lover had left her entangled in a web of criminal dealings. We had to be cautious, but we couldn't ignore the danger Barb was in or the potential threat to ourselves if these criminals decided to come after us. We decided to confront the situation head-on. With Larry's guidance, we contacted the authorities, providing them with the information we had gathered. They took our concerns seriously and initiated an investigation, promising to offer protection if necessary. Meanwhile, we kept a close eye on Barb, ensuring she was safe and staying out of trouble. Despite our reservations, it was clear she was genuinely frightened and desperate for help. One evening, as we were discussing our next steps, Mark's phone buzzed with a message. His face went pale as he read it. "It's Barb," he said, his voice tight. "She's been taken." "What?" I exclaimed, grabbing the phone from him. The message was brief and chilling. "They found me. Please help." We sprang into action, contacting the police and informing them of the situation. They advised us to stay put while they handled the search, but we couldn't just sit around and do nothing. With Larry's reluctant blessing, we decided to find Barb ourselves, using the information we had about her last known location. Following a series of frantic calls and a few leads, we tracked her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was ominously quiet as we approached, the tension almost unbearable. "Stay alert," Mark whispered as we crept inside. We don't know what we are walking into. The warehouse was dark, filled with shadows and the faint smell of decay. We moved cautiously, our senses on high alert. Suddenly, we heard a muffled cry from somewhere deep within the building. "That Barb," Tom said, his eyes wide with fear. "We have to find her." We followed the sound, weaving through the maze of crates and debris. As we rounded a corner, we saw Barb, tied to a chair and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Standing around her were 3 men, their expressions cold and menacing. "Well, well, well," one of them sneered as we approached. "Looks like the cavalry has arrived." "Let her go," I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. The man laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You are in no position to make demands. Do you even know who you're dealing with? Larry had warned us about this. These men were dangerous, and they had nothing to lose. We had to play it smart." "We know enough," Mark said, stepping forward. "We've already contacted the authorities. They are on their way. If you harm her, or any of us, you'll be facing much more than just kidnapping charges." The man's expression faltered for a moment, then hardened. "You think we were afraid of the cops? You're in over your heads." Before things could escalate further, we heard the distant wail of sirens. The men exchanged nervous glances, realizing their time was running out. "Last chance," I said, my voice firm. "Let her go and walk away or face the consequences." For a tense moment, it seemed like they might call our bluff. But then, with a string of curses, the leader motioned to his companions. "Let us get out of here." They untied Barb and shoved her toward us before disappearing into the shadows. We quickly gathered her up, her sobs of relief mingling with our own ragged breaths. As we emerged from the warehouse, police cars screeched to a halt around us. Officers rushed in, securing the area and ensuring the men inside were apprehended. Larry arrived shortly after, his expression a mix of relief and exasperation. "You guys took a big risk," he said, shaking his head. "But you did good." Barb was taken to the hospital for a checkup, and the police assured us they would handle the rest. As we stood outside the warehouse, the adrenaline slowly fading, I felt a profound sense of closure. We had faced the darkness head-on and come out the other side, stronger and more united than ever. In the days that followed, the authorities dismantled the criminal ring Barb's lover had been involved in, and she cooperated fully with their investigation. While our past with her would never be forgotten, we had forged a new path forward, one built on resilience and hope. Emily and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the trials we had faced. Mark and Tom also found new purpose in their lives, embracing the opportunities our new city offered. We had been through hell, but we had emerged victorious, ready to face whatever the future held. As we gathered once more on the rooftop of our apartment building, watching the sun set over the city, I felt a deep sense of peace. The nightmare was over, and we were free to live our lives on our terms. "To new beginnings," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings," Mark, Tom, and Emily echoed, clinking their glasses with mine. And with that, we stepped into the future, united by our shared past and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.